Good morning. My name is Sean Schwarting. I'm the Director of Physical Therapy here at Riverside Walter Reed, and I'm coming today to talk about getting back in the swing and improving your golf game with exercise. So today's already starting off great because I get to talk about golf. I was adjunct faculty before, so of course all good lectures have to begin with the course objectives. And so today we're going to talk about how to identify the role of physical therapy in the golf swing, to identify the primary phases of the golf swing, and to identify the critical physiologic motions required for the golf swing and what exercises you can do to improve your game. So with that, we're going to start out with just a few fun golf facts. One is that there's 377,200,000 rounds of golf played per year. That's a lot of chores not being done at home while we're out playing golf and chasing a little white ball. There's about 24 million golfers in the US, so it's a pretty popular thing to do. Golf is the only sport ever played on the moon. So anytime someone wants to talk about soccer being the world's favorite sport, you can ask them how many rounds were played on the moon, how many matches were played on the moon, and I think golf still wins when it comes to that. Injury rates for golf, even though it seems like a non-contact and non-injurious sport, is somewhere between 1 in 4 and 2 in 3. So basically 25% to 66% of golfers will experience an injury at some point while they're playing. One of the big reasons for this is that the golf swing itself can be very strenuous. Forces on your spine end up being about 7 times your body weight when you're swinging a golf club. To make that even more complicated, this is an entire golf swing will only take 1.5 seconds. So it's a very fast, very quick motion with a lot of force through your body. So one of the questions that always comes up is, what does a therapist do with this? Why isn't this a golf pro? Shouldn't I be doing something else? And the answer is that we play a specific role. We are not golf pros. I don't want to be a golf pro. They have a very complicated job and know a lot of things that I don't know about the golf swing. What I know about the golf swing is how the human body moves and how I can actually help people improve their range of motion and stability to allow their positions that require them to accommodate a golf swing. We talked about some of those coming up. As a physical therapist, I'm also focusing on injury prevention, treatment, and fitness. So we want to help keep you on the course. And if you are off the course because of an injury, we want to make sure that we get you back there as fast as possible. So what a therapist really does is they provide the physical abilities to swing a golf club so that a teaching pro can teach the swing. So as we go through today, just bear in mind what I'm looking at is not going to be the same thing as a Hank Haney or a Butch Harmon or any of those guys. They're looking at very specific components. What I'm looking at as a therapist is, what can your body do? Can it get in the positions that it needs to in order to make sure that you can swing a golf club effectively and then do the things that a golf pro is going to teach you how to do? So this guy's hit a few golf balls in his life. And so what we're going to talk about next is the phases of the golf swing. For our purposes today, we're only going to talk about 4 major pieces. We're going to talk about the setup, we're going to talk about backswing, we're going to talk about the impact position, and we're going to talk about the follow through. So with the setup, a couple of things that we want to pay attention to. Again, we are not physical therapists, are not golf pros. We are not swing coaches. What we're going to look at is what the physical body. So proper grip is important, but your golf pro is going to be the one who's going to teach you how to do that. When I look at a golf swing, when I look at someone's setup, what I'm looking for is, are their arms relaxed? Are their shoulders back? Is their spine in neutral? Are their heels shoulder width apart? Are their toes turned out? Are their hips hinged? And are their ankles bent to about 10 degrees? So from a therapy standpoint, the important things that I see a lot of people have trouble with is that if you look at these pictures of Dustin Johnson and you look at the position on the right-hand picture, you're looking at his head and his shoulders and his hips all in a basically straight line. And you want to see that kind of erect posture. That's an important one to be able to make sure that as he goes back into his backswing, he can maximize that position. There are patients that have difficulty, or golfers that have difficulty with posture. They may have had sitting desk jobs or other things that have caused their upper back to get into a kyphotic or a forward curve, which makes it challenging for them to even get in this starting position. We also have a lot of patients, you can see that hip hinge. So when you look down his spine, and into his hips, you can see that nice angle there. What you don't want to see is a big curve through his lumbar and through his low back. A lot of patients will have difficulty finding where those hips are. We also get a lot of patients at the ankle position to be able to get in that nice relaxed posture with the knees slightly bent. They need about 10 degrees of dorsiflexion. And there are a lot of patients that start to have stiffening of the ankles and they can't get in that initial posture, which then automatically sets off a chain reaction, puts them in a position where it's hard for them to do what they need to do in the golf. When we go to the backswing, we're going to look at a couple of other positions. And again, I'm not going to go into whether the shaft angle on the backswing is past 90 or any of those things. That's what your golf pro is going to work on you with. What I'm looking for is, did they maintain that angle? Did they, with the spine, did they turn and rotate through the trunk and through the pelvis? So you can see with Dustin Johnson's pictures here that his belt buckle is turned to about 45, pointing out over his right knee, and his left shoulder is actually tucked in just a little bit beyond that. So you want to see that good rotation. You can also see that that left shoulder reaches all the way across his body. That's a very challenging position. His right arm is going to be tucked in and turned, usually not as difficult, and his wrists are going to be hinged. Won't go into how many degrees, but you will see people that have difficulty either from carpal tunnel surgeries or wrist fractures that cannot turn their wrist the way that actually starts to be turned. So these are some of the components when a therapist is going to look at their backswing. In particular, I want to see what their pelvis and trunk and shoulder does. You can also tell one of the big things is that his neck has to turn fully to the left. One of the great things about golf is if you have a limitation, just make sure that you can't turn your neck to the right. It won't be any problem on your golf swing. If you lose a little bit to the left, then that starts to change things. So when we come back to the impact from a therapy standpoint, this is not a big position that we pay as much attention to, because physiologically, this is going to be very similar. And if you can get from the setup into the backswing and into the follow through, that's what we care about. Again, you're going to see all kinds of stuff when it comes to golf pros about where his hand position is, where he addresses the ball, whether it's forward or backwards, and a lot of those different components. But from a therapy standpoint, this isn't one that we're going to spend a lot of time on. The last position we're going to look at is the follow through. So notice that you want to see a nice erect posture. If you look at the upper picture, you can see his shoulders are pointed straight down towards that target and his belt buckle's turned towards that target. What that really requires is it requires him to turn all the way in on that left hip. That becomes a very challenging position. It also means that he has to be able to accept weight onto that left side. One of the things that your body's going to do, it's smarter than you are. So if it doesn't feel like it can get in that position, one of the things it's going to subconsciously do is to start to slow your golf swing down, which means that you're not going to be able to actually hit the ball as far, or you're going to end up with a lot of different compensations and different swings. So when we summarize this, what are the key movements needed in order to swing a golf club? These are areas. Now, this is not every single joint. We could be here for another 2 hours if we want to go to a full kinesiologic diagram. What I am going to target is the key areas that I find patients have the most difficulty with, those challenging areas that typically are going to be the kingpins, the most bang for their buck if we can work on those spots. The first one is the neck. So just like we talked about, and again, this is all for right-handed golfers. I apologize to any of my southpaw friends. You'll just have to, I feel certain that at this point in your life, you're used to switching words back and forth to make sure it makes sense. So for a right-handed golfer, the neck rotation to the left is one of the key components. They've got to be able to do that in order to get into that backswing completely. With this left shoulder, they're going to have horizontal adduction, which is the big fancy word for just meaning that arm's got to reach all the way across their body. That can be a very big challenge. You'll see a lot of patients following a rotator cuff or a shoulder surgery. That position becomes very challenging. One of the things that you'll see with that is that if you don't have that motion, you may see some other compensations. They may start to be able to get the club back by bending their left elbow and doing some different components, which makes the golf swing more complicated, less reproducible, and more challenging to be able to hit accurately and consistently. The elbow is going to have to be a full left elbow extension. That's usually the most challenging. My cousin in particular has a hard time with that. He fell when he was 10, broke his left elbow, and can't straighten it beyond 30 degrees. So he's had to make some different compensations for his golf swing, but you will see that motion from old injuries start to kind of show back up. And for the wrist, you're going to see that radial deviation. So they've got to be able to turn those wrists in and out. Again, the most common things you're going to see that are going to give people difficulties if they've had wrist surgeries or they've had fractures. We get a lot of patients that have either fallen from sports or just slips and falls, land on that wrist and break the wrist, and it tends to have some difficulty being able to move. From the trunk and the lower body, this is where you see a lot of these components. The first one is trunk rotation. So left and right rotation is critical. This is not something that a lot of people do in their normal everyday life. And so it tends to be a little bit more challenging for them. Hip full internal rotation. So with internal rotation, that's that turning in. If they go all the way into their backswing and all the way into their follow through, on their backswing, that right hip's going to turn all the way in, and on the follow through, their left hip has to turn all the way in. This is a really, really common motion, especially with arthritic changes. You're going to see people start to lose that motion. When they do, that backswing starts to shorten, they start to lose some distance, and they start to do some different mechanical things. In some cases, it starts to put more stress on their knees or their back, and they start to have other issues from that. And then the last one is that ankle. So being able to dorsiflex to about 10 degrees so that you can start in the right position. If you can't start with that ankle bent up just a little bit, then your knees really can't fall into the right line and your hips can't really set. So it's all kind of starting from that ground up with that ankle position. So just a couple of warnings anytime we talk about exercise is that exercise should not hurt. Especially it should not feel sharp, numb, or stabbing. Those are big red flags. That tells you something is not working the way we want it to. Anytime you have any pre-existing injuries or medical conditions, by all means, talk to your doctor or therapist. Several things that come to mind right off the top is that if you've had a rotator cuff injury, your left, especially of the left shoulder, if you've had hip replacements, that can really make those two conditions jump right up to the top of things that you really need to make sure before you start an exercise program that you talk with them. And then anytime that you start, you should consult your physician or other healthcare professional before starting this or any other fitness program to determine if it's right for you. So when we talk about stretching, we're going to talk about stretching and strengthening as ways to kind of improve your game. So the first one we're going to talk about is stretching. Anytime you're stretching, you always want the muscles to actually have a little bit of blood flow. So you want about a 2 to 5 minute warm up, such as walking or a stationary bike, something low impact, just to allow the blood to flow. There are a lot of different stretching techniques. We're not going to go into all of them. There's ballistics, there's contract relax, there's all kinds of different ones. For our basic purposes today, we're going to go 30 seconds to a minute per stretch. You want to be able to do this for flexibility 5 to 7 times a week. A lot of times when you first start a stretching program, doing additional stretching will actually help. And then when you get into a maintenance position where you're just maintaining the flexibility you have, then you can cut that frequency back. Again, there's lots of different methods. We could talk 2 more hours about different types of stretching techniques. The important part as we go through these next couple slides is what does this look like from a daily or from the positions that we want to work on, and then you can kind of figure out the details that you like. So the first one is in hip rotation. We talked about how critical this motion is. So if you look at the picture of the gentleman in the red shorts, this is just an active position. So his foot is out to the side, he's dropping his knee in, allowing gravity and motion to kind of stretch it. This is a little bit more gentle stretch. If you look at the gentleman in the black shorts, you can see that he's using his opposite knee or his opposite foot on his knee in order to be able to add a little additional rotation or a little additional stretch to that side. This is a super powerful position. I do recommend, one of the things not shown in this picture is that the knee that's down, in this case is right knee, I always make sure that I put either a pillow or a piece of foam or a yoga mat or something underneath because you don't want extra kneecap pressure. What this is going to do is really open up that entire hip and allow you to be able to get into a better posture. All you're going to do is start to lunge in with that leg bent back. You're going to feel a pull down through the front, in some cases as far up as the stomach, all the way down through the front and into the quads. One of the advantages of this position is you also, in the front leg, get some dorsiflexion and get some of that ankle range of motion at the same time. This is a very effective, very powerful stretch. Again, there's a bunch of different ways to do this stretch. So the important part is being able to open up the front part of your pelvis and your hips. The last is a calf stretch. This is one where we start to get that dorsiflexion. The other thing that's important is that golf, especially if you play army golf like I do, and you hit it to the left and then hit it to the right and hit it to the left and go back and forth, left, right. Um, the distance can be even farther, but even in a normal round of golf, you're going to walk about 5 miles if you're walking the course. So being able to maintain flexibility through those calf muscles and through that ankle becomes a real critical component to being able to swing a golf club effectively. As we go into some of the trunk rotations, this is one of a very effective trunk rotation stretch. So you can tell she's going to rotate to the right. Her right knee is across her body. And what that does is helps to close her pelvis so that she can allow some stretching, some gentle stretching through her spine. Her left hand is holding that right leg down so that the pelvis and her whole body doesn't just rotate. The alternative to this position, some people will start to feel some pressure or pain in their right shoulder as they do this, is you can actually put your right hand on your forehead, and that shortens that arm, and then you go into that rotation so that you can still stretch your back and end up some additional rotation without putting as much pressure on your shoulder. And then the shoulder stretch is one that we look at. So we look at that backswing and how important that left arm going across your body is. This is a great stretch to be able to do this. There are a lot of people that will have trouble. If you are feeling a pinch or a stab in the front of your shoulder, that's usually considered an impingement sign. That's not something to continue to stretch. Make sure you talk to your doctor or your therapist about that and see if there's some alternatives of ways to be able to open up that shoulder. When we talk about strengthening, what we're looking at is a bunch of different components. You've seen some of the professional golfers now between Rory McIlroy and Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson that are doing super heavy weights and Olympic lifts and all kinds of things. And that's all great. But here's three basic ones that I would say that are good components that target specific golf areas. Certainly strength training as a whole will improve your golf game. These are three areas that I think actually give you the most bang for your buck. The first one's called a prisoner squat. In particular with the squat, the important components is that your heels stay down and that you're able to sit back into your hips. Ideally, you're able to get your hips and knees at the same level like she does, with your trunk and your shin at about the same angle. The important part is that you don't want pain in your knees. If you're getting pain in your knees, that is not a normal effect from squatting. That has to do with abnormal squatting mechanics, and that's not something to reproduce. If your thigh muscles are sore, your hamstrings are sore, your glutes are sore, great, you're doing a good job, keep it up. So in particular, make sure those heels stay down as you squat down. The nice thing with golf is even if you can't get as low as she's getting, you can still get benefits because the golf swing is going to occur in that first 30 degrees. So you can get some benefits even if you're not getting as low as this picture is. The next one is called a single leg deadlift. This one I highly encourage that this is a great exercise, but it is very complicated. It does allow us to do a lot of strength. It allows us to be able to get some balance and stability. It also allows us to work on the hip hinge that we talked about before, but it is a complicated exercise. It's reasonably safe, but I highly recommend that if you want to add this one, talk to a personal trainer, do some education, do some videos, things like that to be able to make sure that you're doing it correctly so you're getting the most bang out of your buck. And then the last one that's kind of specific to golf is a chopping. So you can see he goes into this half kneeling position, and all he's doing is taking that weight and pulling down and across. So you can tell in that position, he's really firing a lot of those core muscles and a lot of those rotators that are going to be important as we start to go back into that backswing and we start to create power in our golf swing, getting back to that impact to be able to drive a golf ball. So you can tell with those three, that gives you a lot of variations and a lot of options to be able to get some really important specific golf exercise. A general strength program is great. I would incorporate these three, especially if your target is to be able to hit the ball farther, to be able to tie that back in, and you're going to get a little better results. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today and listening. As you can tell, this is one of the things that I really enjoy doing. Working with golfers can be a lot of fun, even though most of us are a little bit crazy, or at least addicted to golf. So if you have any questions, by all means, you can put comments down below and we'll certainly do our best to answer those. And these are also the 2 clinics that I run here in Gloucester. We do have clinics for Riverside all the way throughout the peninsula and middle peninsula. So a lot of fantastic therapists that can help you out and improve your game. So give these exercises a try, and good luck, and hopefully we'll see you on the course.